Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Kaba Ilco number 535-53-41 Jimmy-proof deadbolt lock. And I have it removed from the packaging here so we can review all of the particulars regarding it. Now the 535-53 that we have here is a double cylinder version, meaning that you're going to have a cylinder on the inside lock, and you're going to have a cylinder on the exterior. Naturally, you would always get, or at least your installation would almost always include an exterior rim cylinder that will provide you, of course, access to enter. And what makes it a double cylinder, of course, is the inclusion of a cylinder on the inside, whereas the standard unit will have a thumb turn here. So this is the 535 Jimmy-proof style deadbolt. The 535 specifically tells us that it's double cylinder. This is a -53-41, which is going to tell us that it is a quickset, and I'm looking at the catalog to be sure that I get the part number correct. That is a quickset keyway, typical common quickset, the same quickset key that you're going to possibly already have, in a bronze type color, in a Jimmy-proof style deadbolt. The 530 series would be the same unit, single cylinder. This also tells us that this is going to include a angle style strike. And this first part of the video will serve as visual evidence of all of the pieces. That's an angle strike that you're going to install. Okay, so we've got the interior lock body, we've got the exterior rim cylinder with two original look-alike quickset keys. They're just randomly keyed. And speaking of keying, we can do custom keying for you. We can key them alike, master key them, whatever needs to be done. We can key them to an existing key as well. If you send us that key, we'll be happy to be able to provide that service for you. You've got the angle strike. We, of course, then have the accessories for the rim cylinder, the cylinder collar, the plate, and the two screws, along with all of the screws, the mounting screws that you'd need to install the material. Now let's go over some dimensional properties of the unit next. If you're replacing one, you might want to know exactly where these holes are located for the mounting screws so that you can be sure it's going to fit. First of all, an overall width of the lock body appears to be about 4 1/4, an overall height about 2 7/8, with a thickness of the body about 1 inch. Okay. Now those fasteners, or the center to center on the screw holes, you can see you're about 1 inch and, I'd say 1 inch and 11/16 horizontal center to center, and then a vertical center to center. It's going to be about 2 1/4, I would say. Okay. This rim cylinder, it's a very generic, it is a rim cylinder, meaning it's incredibly generic in its design, just to give you an idea of the overall length. Overall, for no particular reason, this dimension really doesn't matter very much. Length of the tail piece is about 2 3/16. The overall height of the angle strike, about 2 15/16. Overall width, or at least the portion that will be mortised into the rabbet of the frame, about 1 inch and 7/16. The portion that will be on the face of the jamb, about 15/16. That covers the dimensional properties of all of the tangible items that are in the package. Some variants on this. Obviously, you can order this as a single cylinder where there's a thumb turn on the inside. You can order this less cylinder, both in a single cylinder or in a double cylinder. And really all that's going to give you, however, it's really going to just exclude the rim cylinder, is really all that's going to happen, is you're going to exclude the rim cylinder. You can order the double cylinder in a Schlage C keyway. You'd add SC to the part number, and that would give you a Schlage C keyway. That would be helpful if, of course, you're keying it to other Schlage C keyway type locks. Kaba also has rim locks, surface-mounted deadbolts that are self-latching, meaning you just push it closed and it would be a rim lock. And they, of course, also have surface-mounted deadbolts, rim deadbolts as well. Now, where is this lock going to be used? Well, most commonly it's going to be used in residential applications where you'll see these. You'll also see these on the back doors of commercial buildings as well. Obviously, nothing about this would be emergency egress approved. It certainly is a lock set that you would not put on a door that is a path of emergency egress. But you would very commonly install it onto a commercial door that's not in the path of egress, where you want to be able to have a cylinder on both sides of the door. Also, that same outline applies to residential applications where you have a basement. You've got a typical bungalow in Chicago, and you've got that basement level, and you've got a wooden door that leads out to a set of stairs to ground level. A very common opening that you might have there for a double cylinder deadbolt. A lot of people like to put a double cylinder deadbolt on that door, literally to prevent the use of the door to exit, or to be able to unlock the door, really, is what I mean to say. So that if someone were to come in through the window, or if the window was close enough, there was glass in the door, you wouldn't be able to just unlock the unit and come in, and that would be where you'd have that double cylinder. Now, I've also sold and installed these locks to folks who had a side door, was comfortable with the Jimmy-proof style surface-mounted design, and the surface-mounted design lends itself to being easier to install. Even though there are several steps required to install this, it's flexible in terms of the door types that you can install it. However, you're really going to be working only with a wood frame for such an installation, because this angle strike must be mortised to the door and frame in order for it to work properly. Unless, of course, you do one of a couple of things. It does not appear to me that Kaba... Oh, they do, actually. They do offer this lock can be purchased with a flat strike as well, or meaning that you're not going to have this entire leg. This entire long leg would be gone. It would only be the flat strike, which means you'd be able to mount it on an in-swing or an outswing door, and surface mount that flat strike. Alternatively, people have literally taken this and cut or rip that leg off to get a flat strike, because if you're installing this onto let's say an unusual application where it's a hollow metal door and frame, steel door and frame, and it swings out, you won't be able to use this angle strike, because unless you were to shim the lock body off the face of the door, you won't be able to get the bolts pinned down to it. So if you had a flat strike or converted this, you'd be able to mount this to the stop of the frame, just like that. Now, typically where this will be installed is on an in-swinging wooden door, wooden frame application, and that's where being able to mortise this to the frame is going to come into play. Okay, and that would all be mortised flush. But those are the applications. Residential doors where you need to have key control on both sides, occasionally a commercial opening. And the people who are buying these have become partial with exposure to this lock type over time, and find it to be a very reliable, predictable, even economical way to secure a door quite substantially. A lot of people like those surface blocking bolts. And while Kaba didn't invent this lock, this type of lock has been in existence for several decades. Okay, now, the next part of this video is going to get us into talking about the steps of installation. There's a link below this video to the installation instructions where you will be able to follow along if you so choose. So the very top portion of the installation instructions from the factory tell you to do a reality check, review everything, make sure everything looks like it's going to work, commonsensical, that there's nothing that's going to prevent you from a successful installation. Nothing's worse than getting halfway through the job to realize, oh, this will never work. All the way, really, from the physical attaching of the lock and the strike to the door and frame is what I mean. Look at it. Do a reality check. Make sure that it makes perfect sense before moving forward, because especially if you start to drill a hole through a door or mortise a frame for a strike, it's kind of hard to undo that once you realize something's not exactly correct. Okay, now starting with step 1 of the installation instructions, they immediately begin to refer to the template that is included, which is here. Now, this template, when you review this, you are going to most likely immediately realize that this template only works for doors that swing in. You're standing on the interior, which is the side opposite of the lock side, and makes no provisions for being able to install this into an installation where the door swings out and you are installing it on the interior push side. So the lock body is mounted on the pull side of the door, which is the inside of the space, so be mindful of that. If you had a flat strike and we're installing it on a outswing door, the template does no good to you at all, and that's where you'll get into placing the strike. What I do in that installation is I will place the strike on the frame where I want it. I will make sure you can tell that this is not symmetrical, the distance from the end, that you've got the right orientation of where that strike's going to be installed with the short side up or down for your application. And then once I have the strike installed, I literally place the lock on the door, confirm that it works, and then mark my holes. Anyway, so if you're going off the reservation, you need to study it. And if you have any questions before you install this lock, please feel free to reach out to us. So the template is based on the hand of the door, and the top is a left hand. The bottom is a right hand. However, you're facing the door from the interior, so while that template is completely accurate, the lock body from your it's going to look just like this. Left hand, from the way that you're looking at it, which means the door will swing like this and towards you, where I'm on the outside, and I'd be pushing the door. To me, because I'm on the outside, the lock side, it's a left hand. But from your perspective, it's still a left hand, but the hinges will be on the right, and it will pull towards you. So that's important to understand which template to use. The truth of the matter is, if you just follow the silhouette or the outline of the lock body, you can't really get it wrong because it can only go on one way. But, you know, you might say to yourself, well, I'm installing, the hinges are on the right. None of this makes sense. It does when you put it under further scrutiny, I suppose. What they're saying to do is to physically apply the template to the door. Line that up with the actual edge of the door. Set this line even with door edge. I mean, literally, this is a full-size template. Apply it to the door itself. What I like to do before I get started on a situation such as this is I will photocopy the installation instructions. Always. I'll make a copy of them, or have access to where we've uploaded them. Then take scissors and cut my template. I don't want to destroy the original installations because, when you're first learning how to install locks, you realize, oh gosh, I've cut my I don't know what the next step is. I've destroyed the template or the installation instructions. So make a photocopy of it. Get the template applied to the door, literally masking tape or some method of getting it applied to the door. And you are going to see that there are there are 5 points that you need to address. The 4 mounting holes, and then the cylinder through the door. And assuming that you're putting a cylinder on the outside of the door, not everyone does. You just want a key bolt on the inside and no evidence from the exterior how to get in, because there is no way in. You wouldn't drill that 5th hole, naturally, but in a standard installation you will. Once the template's on, and you're going to physically locate it vertically on the door where it suits, where it's most appropriate for your door installation, where it's going to fit in conjunction with any sort of other locks in glass or trim or molding. Also, how it will work in compliance with the users. You might have someone who's in a wheelchair or handicapped. You might have someone who's simply shorter. You might have someone who's taller. You might have an unusual application on the door where you're installing 2 of these and you want to spread out the points where you're going to install them. So pick a place that works, and then once you know that you've got it located and the template is placed correctly, take a center punch and your hammer and tap those 5 holes with your center punch. There's an important reason for doing that, and that is when we get to drilling the holes, which is literally the next step, the drill bit, when it starts to drill into the door, it won't walk or have a tendency to walk, regardless of the door being steel, fiberglass, wood, aluminum, stainless, bronze. That center punch keeps that V tip of the drill bit right in place, and it's really important because when it comes to lock sets, there's a small amount of margin to be off, but they're not intended to be off at all. And when the holes are drilled absolutely correctly, the lock will work without exception, smoothly and reliably, confidently, predictably, safely. Let's go through step 1 of the installation instructions. Apply appropriate template to the inside of the door, punch to mark the 4 screw holes and the cylinder hole, and drill, punch the holes. Next, drill the 1¼ inch diameter hole partially through the door, which of course is for the cylinder here. Stop when the point of the hole saw breaks through. Drill through the outside of the door to avoid splintering. Then drill the 4 pilot holes of 3/4 inch deep, which are 1/8 inch in diameter. That cylinder hole, let's talk about that. You're going to take I would suggest that you take 1¼ inch hole saw, a bimetal hole saw, and you drill that, okay? I would probably drill the 4/8 inch pilot holes first on the door, 3/4 deep, for the 4 screws that are going to attach, those 4 holes that you see here. I would do those first. Then, because I've got my holes marked, you can drill right through the template, but at that point, before you run an 1¼ inch hole saw into the paper template, remove that. You've got your hole, maybe get a marker, pencil, a pencil, and mark the hole. And then drill into the door. You'll know that you're flat when all of the teeth of the hole saw make contact at one time. Some people will use a multi-spur bit. I don't believe that that's the right tool because those spurs have a tendency to rip and flare and tear the wood out, whereas a hole saw has less tendency to do that. You could even drill the hole, make contact, and then put it in reverse and score the face of the door, breaking the veneer and the crossbanding so that you're not ripping as you go clockwise with your drilling. I even prefer hole saws after they've been used a couple of times because the tips are a little duller. There's less chance of tearing and ripping, and you have to give it a little more force to push it through, but you're controlling it better when you've got more muscle, so to speak, on the process. You're going to want to stop when the arbor bit pierces through the other side because that will mark where you then remove the hole saw from the door, remove the core out of the hole saw, go to the other side, and then complete the hole. And that's how you'll do that. But just as it pierces, just as it's touching, and in fact, I'll have my hand outside, and I will stop as soon as I can feel it, and it's really not even pierced through yet because I don't want to completely evacuate that pilot hole because I want to give my arbor bit something to seed into without it already flopping around because I've drilled that hole completely. That's how I like to do that. Now, at that point, you've got really all of the holes for the lock set drilled into the door, and you're ready now to start to literally install the hardware. The next part of the video goes on to installing that rim cylinder. Okay, now installing that rim cylinder, let's get into it. You place, step 2 in the installation instructions is place the cylinder and cylinder ring and insert into the 1¼ inch hole from the exterior, from the outside of the door. Position keyhole to bottom, see sketch. Okay, so you're going to take the cylinder collar, assuming you're going to use this, or some cylinder collar. Place that there. Put this through the hole. You'll notice that the hole for the cylinder plug is not in the direct center, or the exact center of the cylinder face. It's pointed towards the bottom. Put that at the bottom when you insert it through the hole. Okay. Now, the next step of this, step 3, is saying to install the back plate. Place back plate over connecting bar and attach to cylinder using the 2 break-off screws provided, which are for 2¼ inch thick doors. For thinner doors, screws should be cut to the proper length. Depending on thickness of door, screws are provided with break-off points. Important, line up back plate 1/8 inch from the edge of the door. See the sketch above. Break off connecting bar so that it extends 1/2 inch beyond face of the back plate. Connecting bar is provided with break-off points. Okay, so this goes through the door. This is the backing plate. You can see how that's going to work. Okay, you got the holes there for the 2 bolts that will secure it to the door. You've got these 2 small countersunk holes for securing the plate to the face of the door, and that the edge of the plate is to be 1/8 inch from the edge of the door. Okay. Now, once you get that installed, what they're saying is the tail piece, the connecting bar, is to stick out 1/2 inch. Don't take pliers and just try to bend that. Determine where the point is through the door, attach the backing plate in place so that it's there and fixed. Mark off when you insert it through 1/2 inch projection. Then remove it and carefully cut that with a hacksaw. Don't bend this tail piece or connecting bar at all, because when the cylinder rotates, it needs to rotate laser beam straight. Otherwise, if you bend the tail piece, it will not operate the lock correctly because it's going through like a eccentric sort of path as you turn the key to turn the tail piece. So carefully cut that. Then, of course, these screws, you're probably going to nip them off at the first point. You're going to go to 2¼ inch thick doors out of the box. If you've got an 1¾ inch door, I'd cut those right. I'd carefully cut those right there, and I would take off, probably 1/2 inch from the tail piece. 2¼ down to 1¾ inch. Obviously, you can get to 1 3/8. Take off a little bit more, maybe break those screws right down here. And of course, there are 2 of those. And they do, again, go through the door. Just like that. Obviously 2 screws. Now your cylinder is completely attached to the door altogether. It says follow installation detail down below for shortening the connecting bar. They're basically showing you use 2 pliers and bend. That will work. You just don't want to bend the rest of the connecting bar. I prefer to more carefully cut the material so that I can control what's happening. And you don't want to stress anything that's down here that's holding that C-clip that's holding the tailpiece on. And in fact, if it was me, I would be removing the tailpiece, and I'm not saying you should, but that C-clip will come off. The tailpiece will come out. You can put it into a vise and make a nice clean cut, deburr it, and reinstall it. Just don't damage the goods when you're installing it is the point of all of this. That brings us to step 4. Set bolt in unlocked position and place lock on the connecting bar. Attach lock to inside of the door using the 4 long wood screws provided. Check to see that the lock is working properly from both inside and outside. So what they're saying is, you've got a hole through the door with a tailpiece sticking through your mounting plate. Okay. You're going to depress what is called the shutter guard. You're going to get that tailpiece stuck into that hole, that the plus-shaped hole. Okay, you can let that shutter guard go, and then literally hold this on the door and test the operation from the outside. And what you're doing is you need to make sure that you can not only operate the lock, locking the bolt and removing the key, relocking the bolt and removing the key. You need to make sure that all works. If it doesn't, the timing of that is off on the inside. You'll need to rotate that a little bit slightly and then reinsert the tailpiece once you've retimed the lock. Very simple. If it doesn't work, depress the shutter bar, get a flat screwdriver, stick it in there, turn it a quarter turn, try it again, and then process of elimination from there. Why is there a shutter guard? Simply put, if someone were to rip that cylinder off the face of the outside of the door, you still have a cover from what would be nothing other than a screwdriver that would allow someone to enter. Okay, so that's a shutter guard. That is also explained at length below this video as well. Once you're satisfied that everything works, you've already got the holes drilled 3/4 deep. Use those 4 long screws that are in there and complete your installation. Okay? You might need to, they say pre-drill that 3/4 deep. That screw is basically 2-inch long. The body is 1 inch, and you've drilled it 3/4 deep, so that would make sense. You'd be able to get that screw in there nice and securely. Be mindful not to drill through the door naturally when you're pre-drilling those 4 holes. Get the lock secured to the door, and double check to make sure that your key operation now on both sides works correctly, both the interior and exterior. Okay, you can remove it in a locked and unlocked position is what you want. Now we're moving to step 5. At this point, you're going to apply the strike to the jamb in line with the lock. See the sketch to the right. Mortise or recess the strike to the door jamb if necessary. Then attach into jamb with the 7 short screws provided. There are not 7, there are only 4. There must have been a design change, and I know why, because there used to be more holes in these plates than there are now. There's only 4, and they are all the same length. So at this point, you're literally going to place the strike onto the jamb, and you're going to you're just simply going to line it up, is what you're going to do. Okay. Depending on your installation. Mortising this to the jamb is what the template is calling out for. You're going to literally mortise the thickness of this material, which is probably about 70 thousandths of an inch thick. So it's not very thick at all, and if you can by any chance use a router, do that. But if the jamb is existing, I was way off. This is 0.1 inch thick. 0.1 inch thick. So not quite 1/8 of an inch. Closer to 3/32 of an inch. So you're going to want to mortise this flush if possible, in line with your installation. Okay, so the small side could be on the bottom or it could be on the top, depending on your installation. That's just going to be a visual circumstance. You're going to make sure that you get this installed so that you can lock and unlock the unit with this strike in place. And you have a small amount of play there, but not very much. Maybe 1/8 of an inch in the lateral movement. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. Very, very small amount of lateral play. So you're going to want to get it placed on the jamb, mortised correctly, and then begin to install. And then when you get that installed, you're going to make sure everything works. You don't want to have to alter this at all. The 4 screws, those are here, and obviously here and here. Be very careful when mortising. You don't want and putting the screws in. Be sure to pre-drill those holes because you don't want to split the jamb. That will become a very significant weak point in the installation if you split something. Now, pro tip: since this is the part where the rabbet of the frame is, what you could do is source much longer screws because you should have a stud behind here. Get some 3-inch long screws. Something of that nature, but again, be very clear to pre-drill. You want to go through the jamb, through the void behind the stud, then into the double stud and really secure it. But here you won't be able to because you're not going into anything except the frame. You'll use short screws there. But obviously this used to be made with more holes, and you would use short ones out here and then the longer ones back here where your stud would be. Okay. At that point, there's nothing else to these installation instructions. The only thing I can tell you is be very cautious when you are chiseling for the strike. Use a very good sharp chisel, and you don't want to split anything because that's where this installation can go south on you. If you're doing this job for someone, you're installing material, you might be just getting started out as a locksmith, and you go to a condo and install one. This is a true story. It happened to me 20 plus years ago. Client came in. There was a break-in in a 60-unit condo building. And they said, I need a latch guard. I was broken into. Can you come install it? Sure. The condo building was a mile away. I went and I installed it. Next thing I know, the guy comes in the next day. Hey, it works all good. Can you come conduct a meeting for the entire board and body of tenants in the building? The next thing I knew, I was at the condo building that night putting on a dog and pony show about latch guards. And I must have signed up 2/3 of all the people in the building. One of those installations, I split the jam. And while it was incredibly minor splitting, mostly cosmetic, because those screws sunk deep into the stud as well, it was, and it remains to this day, 2 decades later, a blemish on the hurried nature of doing something and not doing it properly. And I think I may have not pre-drilled that one single hole properly. And you don't want to make that sort of mistake, because there's no reason for this to be not installed perfectly every single time. Experience will teach you how to avoid those mistakes, I suppose. They don't give any installations guidance really on installing the strike. Line it up. Make sure it works. That's all that they're saying, and that's all that you really can do. Now finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Kaba Ilco products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Now the name Kaba Ilco is synonymous with many things. Not only security hardware items related like this Jimmy-proof sort of deadbolt, but when it comes to the world of cylinders, they are a comprehensive provider of that material and manufacture rim and mortise cylinders, key and knob lever, deadbolt style cylinders, and a couple of dozen different keyways, maybe 10 different finishes. They can provide a variety of different lengths and sizes and tailpiece requirements. They can provide it keyed in any fashion imaginable, and they can do it with their high-quality base material, which is brass, which is almost the entire line, except for something like this. This is a zinc plug, which is a low-cost, lower-quality version. You could upgrade that to a solid brass rim cylinder, which is by far more durable, more reliable, because the higher caliber material allows for tighter machining tolerances when the material is manufactured. However, that zinc cylinder is so common that, you know, it's not even worth a mention. Don't go out of your way to change it if it's a residential application. If you've got a bunch of different people working this, maybe it's a common door in a building somewhere, upgrade to the brass cylinder. You're gonna want that in about 6 months anyway. I'm partial to Kaba Ilco because their sales department is fairly responsive. Their technical support people over there are responsive. If there's a question about something unusual, you can always get an answer from them, and I appreciate that. If you have any questions on the Kaba Ilco 535-53-41 double-cylinder Jimmy-proof deadbolt or any other Kaba Ilco product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.